Bonjour, welcome everyone to an encounter with David A. Robertson this morning. I'm Rachel McCrum. I have a couple of words of intro to say first of all before we start. This activity is offered by Kwahiatonhk and the Maison de la littérature as part of the 12th First Nations Book Fair. A TELUS presentation in collaboration with the CN, Innergex Renewable Energy, Hydro-Québec, the Caisse Desjardins de Wendake, and OKT Law. Produced by Kwahiatonhk, the 2023 edition is made possible thanks to the financial support of the Canada Council for the Arts, the Government of Canada, the Government of Quebec, the SODEC, and CDFM huron-wendat. It's my pleasure today to introduce David A. Robertson. Dave, is a member of the Norway House Cree Nation. He's the author of over 25 books for young readers and has won multiple awards, including winning the Governor-General's Literary Award for Illustrated Books in 2017 for When We Were Alone, and then a second time in 2021 for On the Trapline, illustrated by Julie Flett, which has also won numerous awards, the Writers' Union of Canada Freedom to Read Award in 2021, the Globe and Mail Children's Storyteller of the Year, and frankly, too many others to name. Dave, I have to say that I feel like people must see a book by you coming out and think, oh. David is the writer and host of the podcast of QAO Podcast, winner of the 2021 RTDNA Prairie Region Award for Best Podcast. His first adult fiction novel, which we're going to be talking about today, is The Theory of Crows, which was published in 2022 and won his second Carol Shields Winnipeg Book Award at the 2023 Manitoba Book Awards. I feel like I've set the ground there well enough. Before we get started in conversation, I'm going to invite you to read an extract, please, from The Theory of Crows.
Okay. Thank you. I will. Old enough now that I have to take my glasses off when I read. Yeah, I think I'm going to read a little. So this novel is told in three parts, really, and one of them is through the perspective of one of the main characters. His name is Matthew, who's a dad, and then the other one is Holly, who's the daughter. And throughout the book, Matthew has written these letters to his daughter to try and help her to understand why he's been kind of a dick to her, and just generally really withdrawn from everything. And so this is like one of the letters that he's written to her about a memory he has of a trip, a camping trip they took together all the way to Hydro-Québec on the west coast of Canada, off the west coast of Canada. So this is just a little letter that he's written to Holly, his daughter. There's a mention here of him saying that he's Cree. That's just like one of the many First Nations people in Canada. So that's just in case, just for a disambiguation, I guess. Okay. After you'd asked to go up north with me, winter slowed to a crawl. I didn't think it would ever end. The one good thing about it was that I had time to think. I ended up thinking a lot about the last time we'd gone on the road together, that first year we didn't go up to the lake. I know I've told you that I was upset you didn't want to go, but the trip was a good thing. There were times that sucked, nobody would argue with that, but there were times that didn't, even during the first half of the trip. I remember staying at a campsite outside of Canmore in Bow Valley Provincial Park, right beside Kananaskis River. Your mother picked the best spots to camp. At night, you could hear the river, and it was like a lullaby. I slept better than I'd ever slept before. It was like listening to a never-ending rainstorm. One morning, I got up, and you weren't in the tent. I panicked a bit, but because the day before, we'd gotten into a fight. I rushed all over the place trying to find you. You were sitting on a log by the riverbank watching the water, and you looked peaceful. You were watching the water, I was watching you, and I felt peaceful too. A night or two before we got onto the ferry to Hydro-Québec, we stayed at a campsite in Ucluelet. When we were driving in, we thought there was a statue of a black bear, a baby, sitting on a log out at the entrance. But right after we stopped to take a picture, it darted off into the woods. A mother bear had been spotted in the campground the same day, and so all the campers were warned to be extra diligent. Your mother had booked a site at the edge of the trees, pretty much on the beach, a few yards away from the ocean. I sat outside on the picnic table at night because the ocean was calmest and clearest then, like a sheet of glass. The moon hovered above it, and it cast a path of white light from the shore to the horizon. On the second night you came outside, I thought you were going to sit with me, but you had to go to the bathroom. And you wanted me to walk with you because of the bear sightings. It was a pretty good walk to the outhouses, and halfway there you screamed that you saw a bear. We ran to our campsite. I looked back while we were running, and I swear you mistook a bush for a bear, but walking with you and running with you was like, okay, things can be normal, things aren't so bad. On the ferry ride, you saw a whale. I was jealous that you saw a whale, but you describing it was about as good as seeing one. It was the next best thing. After that, it was like a whole new trip. On Hydro-Québec, we stayed in that cottage on the beach in the northern tip of the island. There was no running water and no electricity. During those 4 days, without television, without cell service, the world could have been ending and we never would have known. I remember thinking that that was how my father used to live, and it was the first time I got why he loved it so much. I liked being away from the rest of the world. We played board games and read by candlelight when the sun went down. We walked to a house in the middle of nowhere that people flocked to in the morning from all over the island, a bakery with cinnamon buns that dissolved on your tongue. We hiked to the top of Toe Hill, and you said that you could see Alaska. We cooked hot dogs on the beach and made bannock on sticks. I burnt mine, and it ended up looking like a cattail. What kind of Cree am I asked. On the morning of our departure, I saw you standing at the water's edge. The tide was out. Your mother and I finished packing up the car, and then she waited on the porch reading a book while I went to get you. You had your shoes in one hand, and your feet were in the water. I took my socks and shoes off and stood beside you. You reached out and took my hand. Remember that bet we made when you were 9, I said? Yeah, you said. I already lost. I owe you like $100. A big wave hit our legs. It got you wet up to your thighs, me wet up to my knees. It pushed us back, but we held each other steady. Do you want a do-over, I said? Nah, you said. I like this moment too much to make it about money. Me too, I said. The only thing better would be if a whale swam right by us right now. Well, maybe on the way back, you said. Yeah, I said, maybe then. You squeezed my hand. That moment was my whale. It's crazy. We stayed out there for maybe half an hour. You squeezed my hand for maybe a second. The average lifespan is about 700,000 hours. 700,000 hours, hallelujah. Don't ask me how I know that. But when you put it like that, doesn't it seem like we live forever? We fit so much into that 700,000 hours, but that half hour is one of the things I remember more than most, 30 minutes. And that second, that's as clear as anything else in my life. My calculator says that 700,000 hours is 2.5 billion seconds. And how can 1 second out of 2.5 billion be so clear? Just a moment in time, razor thin. It really makes you think. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, and for giving us a taste of Matthew's world, the dad's figure. One of the things that I loved a lot of things about this book, and I'll go through them in very slow, detailed questioning, but was the fact that the story is told from the two perspectives. So you're hearing kind of Matthew's internal world, and you're hearing Holly, or Hallelujah, to give her full name's internal world as well. But they're not really talking to each other. Matthew's writing these letters, Holly writes poems, and their communication between the two of them has pretty much broken down in a way that's actually quite painful to read, particularly if anyone has teenage children in their life, I will say as well. Can you tell me more about the decision to write the book from the two perspectives, and also sort of inhabiting those two voices, because they're so believable, the both of them?
Well, yeah, thanks. No, I think part of being able to write from the perspective of a teenage girl is I have 3 girls myself, so it gave me a little bit of a primer on voice. They also were really good in letting me know when I was doing it poorly. So my two older girls in particular were really good at telling me when I at one point Holly was wearing Blundstones or something, and she was like, "Dad, she's not going to wear Blundstones. That's not going to work," or just like phrases or something she would say where they would fix for me. So that was really helpful. So I think the approach to doing it was I wanted for the reader to get the inside of the head of both characters, and I wanted to show how a lot of the things that we go through as parents, we inadvertently pass a lot of that down to our children. And so the thought processes and the kind of the manifestations of anxiety and mental health, and how each character lives with it and how they process through it. And the things that they do to address it, whether it's like healthy ways or unhealthy ways. I wanted to show the connection intergenerationally of that trauma. And so I thought the best way to do that would be to tell the story from two different perspectives, and then to show the connection even through their disconnection. And so I thought it was a really interesting way to have a case study for both characters. And it was also like a good way to ease my way into writing, adult literary fiction, because I hadn't really done it too much before. And so, and it was, for me, the probably the most difficult thing was writing in a YA voice for Holly's chapters. So Holly's chapters are very much, they read like a YA book. And then when you switch to Matthew's chapters, it reads very much like a literary fiction novel. And so, like balancing the two was in a way sometimes that maybe it could feel a little jarring, was intentional. But I think that was to me that was how I wanted to structure the novel, and then having the letters from Matthew, it also gave you kind of like a even deeper look into his psyche and like the way that he's kind of trying to process through the things that he's done, and trying to understand not only for Holly but for himself, kind of why he is the way he is and how he can heal from that, and how they can heal from it. So it's just like a very long, like therapy session. The book,
But it's interesting to hear you describe it nearly as a case study, because you see the intergenerational trauma that is happening with Holly, but it's with this very specific, very concrete nucleus of Matthew's profound depression, which has been going on for a very, very long time. And also that his father then, so Holly's grandfather, who's very important in the book, the way that he soothes Matthew and is there as a source of strength and is someone that Matthew knows to go to, was incredibly touching. And so to take something that is, I was going to say as banal as depression, and I don't mean that depression is banal in any way, but it's so common.
Yeah.
But to show the impacts, even when it isn't wholly named, because Holly's confused at the start. She's just like, why has he stopped showing up?
Right.
So that decision to go with a very commonplace mental health, and then the impacts as that cycles out, where did that come from?
Well, I mean, in a lot of ways, Theory of Crows is like an auto-fiction. So I wrote this novel, I started writing it maybe about a year or so after my dad died. And a lot of things that happened with Matthew, it happened with me. And the relationship between Matthew and Holly, my older daughter, Emily, it happened with her and I, and so like I became so withdrawn and so stuck in my own depression, and it was a really dangerous depression, that I just didn't know how to connect to the world anymore. And I don't think it's hard to understand like how, unless you've been through that sort of depression, how you just don't give a shit like how about anything really. And even though you know that you love the people around you, you just can't summon any sort of energy to connect. And you just want to be in bed, and you just want to, at best, be in bed. And so it drew Emily and I apart for a long time. Emily wouldn't talk to me for probably about 6 months. We didn't talk. And it was also looking at, I think it was like, in a way, looking at like consent in a way too, because like, Emily's wish for me not to talk to her, it was important for me to honor that, and so even when I started to come out of my depression through writing and through music and through medication and, all these different therapies, different kinds of therapy, whether they're actual therapeutic like medication or music as therapy, whatever it might be, I still didn't talk to her because she didn't want me to, and so I wanted to wait for her to tell me that it was okay for me to talk to her again. And one night I picked her up from a party, and it was like 1 a.m, and my wife was sleeping, and so I had to go get her. And then we were driving home, and then she talked to me for the first time, and then we kind of talked through everything. But so much of this book is coming from a place of my own depression and my own kind of struggle with mental health. And so I think that's why I was able to write from a really kind of believable perspective, because it was my own perspective. And so everything that Matthew's going through, and the way his dad's death has kind of compounded his depression and anxiety, is something that I was able to draw from just from my own experience, and seeing how my own kids have kind of developed different levels of anxiety and stuff, and then how I should be able to be not a product that is a destructive influence, but somebody that helps them to work through that anxiety and those mental health struggles, because I've been through it. And I think that's kind of, if I take on that role as a writer, then I should be able to take on that role as a father. And so I think that's all of it.
Thank you for sharing that. That's I think it's evident in the book, the depth of experience within it, but also that the book feels in itself like a reconnection. It's an act of seeing, and as we said, the choice to understand it from Holly's perspective as well is profoundly empathetic in that. And I will say Holly is, her fury is so tangible in it, and that's, there's an act of generosity, I think, in putting that out there as well. So thank you for that. When we move into the second half of the book, and it comes back to the reconnection with the land and this idea that it's going to bring them back together, it's going to bring them back to themselves. They're looking for mushrooms for the grandfather's trapline. What does the land mean to you? Where had that come from?
Yeah, I mean, the land has meant more to me over the last few years than it ever has before. And it really was, the catalyst for that really was going to the trapline with my father. And I was able to take him out there. He hadn't been there for, I think, 70 years, up to his trapline. So we got to spend the day out on the trapline together. And I remember, when we went out there, the first thing I noticed was that he looked younger and stronger than he'd looked for a long time. And so I really felt like literally he was drawing life from the land, from the water. And it's almost like a supernatural thing to notice. And I took a picture of him. I just was like, I need to document just how he looks right now, because he looks like we might have more time with him. We didn't really, but and then when we got to the actual land, I remember stepping out onto the land where my dad grew up, and I just felt like comfortable, and I felt like I'd come home. It's not like I travel a lot, and so when I'm out for a long time, and I just was in Germany for over a week, and when I got home, there's this feeling of safety and familiarity and family and community when you step into your house, So I think home is more, conceptually, it's not a physical place, but it's like a place of all of those things. It houses, like I think all the things that shelter you, that isn't actual shelter, you know? And so I felt that when I went onto the land, and I just felt like, and I've come to understand that as being blood memory, where, you know, the lives and experiences of the people who came before you are woven into the fabric of like your identity and who you are. And so I remember just thinking like, this is home. And this is like, and for the first time, I think I felt protective of it. And I really got like this whole real problem with land stewardship and what we're doing to the land, and how if we lose that, we lose not only what gives us life, but also what gives us community. And so a lot of the books I've written since then, if not all of them, have all been what I've kind of called like land-based books. So Theory of Crows, and even like the Mississauga series, and On the Trap Line, and you know, they're all like land-based literature. And so I felt like it was really important for me to emulate that as well in this book, and articulate not only the healing power that the land has individually, but how it can also heal the relationship between two people by reconnecting to the place where, you know, we've always belonged to. And so that's kind of why I wanted to work that into. And the embodiment of that, the title of the book really comes from this concept, and I think real scientific, you know, scientifically proven that like crows, ravens, they can remember faces. And oftentimes they can pass down that remembrance to future generations. I just think that's such a beautiful thing to consider. And I kind of extrapolated that into, like, what if the land can remember us? Like, what if, as much as we remember the land, what if the land can remember us? And what if the land can, like, welcome us? And I just felt like that was a really beautiful thought. And whether I think there's truth to it, but I think like conceptually it's just such a gorgeous thing to imagine. And so that's what I've tried to write into this book as well, is that, so it is a very much a land-based book, and there are also some things that I think just like inspired it, you know, like oddly enough, you know, Farley Mowat's Lost in the Barrens was something that I thought a lot about when I was writing it, just writing it from like not as generalized or stereotypical as Lost in the Barrens, but I think like that kind of adventure aspect was something that was going to be really interesting to me, and to show how someone might survive on the land if they've never done it before. So they have to like not die, you know. So that was also like a struggle for Matthew. But Holly like has this like fiery confidence to her that I think really pulls them through. And it was fun to really write a character that has the autonomy and power. And it's not Matthew, it's Holly. And that was really, really cool to write. And she's my favorite character I think I've ever written. Yeah.
I really don't. I was sort of like, can I ask him about the end, and how Holly demonstrates this just incredible resilience. And I really don't want to spoil the book, because I think you'll need to go and buy it and read the end, so I don't think we should tell them what happens.
Yeah.
But you should go and read it, because the way that Holly, you're just cheering for her at the end. You're like, come on, girl, you got this. And yeah, it's great. You just have to go and buy it. And so, speaking then back to your own daughters, have you brought them out to the land? How's that transmitting for you?
Yeah. So we went to the land. Like my father and I went to the land in 2018. So we went out there together, and that was the year before he passed away. And then in 2019, I took my kids out, and my dad at that point wasn't well enough to go out with us. But it showed me just how important it is to make intergenerational connections. So my dad, you know, when we were out there on the land together, he taught me a lot of things about his life out on the land. As well, he taught me about the fact that there was another trap line he grew up on that he couldn't find anymore. And that's kind of was one of the seeds of this book, was to, you know, I wanted to bring my dad back out to find this lost trap line. Obviously, he was passed away, so I couldn't do it, but I've always wanted to see if I could bring a piece of him there and find it. And so that was an adventure. And sometimes I think literature, like when you write about it, your brain tricks yourself into thinking you've actually done it. and so it was a way for me to kind of do that for my father. So that was, just as an aside, I think that was something I really wanted to do. And then, and so what was the first part?
I was just asking about bringing your girls up to the.
Oh yeah, I always have these tangents. And I'm like, wait, what was it? So the next year, I brought my family out there, and everything that my dad taught me, I was able to teach my kids, and it was so in that way it was like my father teaching them through me. So I became like a vessel, and that was really interesting to see that happening, and it was also interesting to see how my kids had the same reaction that I had in how I felt home there. They felt like home there, and I remember like my young daughter Lauren, and she's someone who has probably more than my other kids deals with anxiety, and at that time she was, so this was 4 years ago. She would have been like 9 years old. And we were leaving the land at the end of the day, and we've been out there for the whole day. We've been fishing, and we walked around my dad's trap line, and so we were kind of walking towards the boat, and she grabbed my jeans, and she pulled on my jeans, and I was like, oh, what is it? And she's like, Dad, I just feel so calm here, and that was that said to me a lot, that because I felt the same way. I take anti-anxiety medication, and I didn't think about taking them that day when I was out on the land, and I feel like Lauren felt that same sort of calmness of being out there, and just like the serenity and peace and safety of being out in the arms of Mother Earth. And I think that is really it makes me miss it a lot when I'm not there, but that's I think that's why I write about it so much.
I was going to say, is this, kind of looking to the future, is this something you're going to continue to explore with adult fiction? Are you staying with adult writing for a while, or writing for adult audiences, I should say, or?
I've had a balance. I think that, I'll always write for kids just because kids are, really important to me, and really are the agents for change. And I feel like it's so important for them to have books that teach them things that they ought to know, so that they can make better decisions than have been made and that are being made even today. And so I want to, do whatever I can to contribute to building a better community. And I think that is best done through, through the children. The more you know, the better you do, I feel like. So I'll probably always write for children. But I do find that I'm more and more wanting to write more mature adult literature. And it's not to say that you can't infuse a lot of that into children's literature, because what I've learned as a children's writer is that you should never underestimate the intelligence of a child. And so the Mississauga Saga, for example, is actually a very mature series, and it deals with a lot of really heavy issues, which kids have gotten. I've talked to tens of thousands of kids about this series, and I've yet to meet a kid who anything's gone over their head, and so they're very, very smart. But I think that the difference in children's literature and adult literature is that you can go to, I think, more difficult places. You can investigate things like trauma in a way that is probably a way that children shouldn't see or read at their age. And you can also swear a lot more.
Always very liberating to be able to have a good swear in the books as far as they go.
I think actually that you ought to be able to swear in children's literature. When I was writing in middle grade.
I look forward to this campaign, David.
Well, I try my best, because I have 5 kids, so they all swear, even my 8-year-old, one time he was walking to the car in the last winter, and he slips and he goes, shit. And then he's looks up at me, and I was like, James, and he's like, oh, Dad, I'm so sorry. But so I the last few drafts of the last couple of books of the Mississauga Saga series, which is this young adult, middle grade fantasy series, I've, the third book, I think I tried to work in, I think about 40 swears in the draft. Yeah. Which kids would actually do. And then my editor, it was almost like a game, so I could see if my editor could find them all. So I've done that in the books, but like I do recognize that having too many is probably it restricts your access to classrooms. So I haven't, but anyway, but there is like I think there's a balance between like I think there's like almost like sometimes adult writers, and I've done it too. Like think that swearing accounts to like is kind of like what makes something adult literature. Or makes it more mature literature. I don't think that's necessarily true, but I think it's actually, finding the truth in dialogue and stuff like that, and that, some people just drop a lot of, F-bombs and stuff, and so if it's a part of the character trait of the character, I think that makes sense. But I think to do it frivolously is not, it doesn't really work, but yeah.
I love it. I just have an image of people going and counting the number of swears in your books. It's like, I found 39 in this one. But it's also part of that kind of ethos of not talking down to kids, right? It's kind of going like, people do swear, and there's nothing more frustrating than when you have, a parent who swears in front of you a lot, but then you're not allowed to swear as well. It's like, what is this hidden knowledge? What is this access that they have to these magic words?
And then, but in literature too, like, you don't have a scene with an adult where the adult's like, gosh darn it, so it's just like, stuff like that. But anyway, so I have a couple of, actually a bunch of adult books coming out. Like I have a memoir that I'm working on about my mental health journey. So it's just a nonfiction book. And then I have a nonfiction book about reconciliation and the ways in which we can go about reconciling, or the roles that how we can figure out our roles in this pathway of reconciliation. And then I'm working on a follow-up adult literary fiction novel, and it's kind of a ghost story, but it's also just about a guy who's trying to reconcile like the wrongs in his life so that he can move on, and it's a really, really, I think, cool, really weird novel. Yeah.
Cool and weird is the good ballpark. I mean, that sounds amazing, and I will look forward to all of those coming out. I just wanted to go back to something you'd said earlier about music, because I felt the presence of music in this book. And then I went back through it to look for your references. I was like, oh, I feel like there's not as many references as I thought there were, but for me there was just music is connection, and certain bands were just infusing it the way through. And they have a brilliant conversation, I think, about Sufjan Stevens or Justin Vernon or something at some point.
Yeah, Bonnie Bear,
and then at the back as well, you name, the literary influences, and you have this lovely sort of, I was going to say trait, but sort of trick, you call everybody by surname, which I thought was lovely because it feels very personal. So just music in the book influences importance of other people's work coming in.
Well, I do think that it's not an overstatement, I think, to say that music probably helped save my life, like about 4 years ago, when I was really struggling. When my dad died, I was into hot springs in Banff. I found out my dad died when I was literally in the middle of the hot springs, and there was like 300 people around me. It's like breaking down. And then I got on a plane to Calgary that day, just at the beginning of our vacation. And I was in the airport, and the plane was delayed like three or 4 hours. And I was sitting in the airport just crying, and no one was, and I'm not judging anybody, but no one came to like say anything to me, which I thought was like really, really odd, because I feel like if I saw someone breaking down in an airport, I'd probably go say, "How you doing?" But I put my earphones in, and I listened to a song by Bonnie Bear, I think 50 times, over and over and over again. It's a song called Naïm by Bonnie Bear, and it really helped me get through that 4 hours to get on the plane and to get home. And then when I really fell into a depression, it was a few bands and a few songs that really helped me start to heal. And I think art can save lives, whether it's literature or music or dance or whatever it is. There's a really amazing story Bill Murray tells. I don't know if everyone knows what Bill Murray is, but
Bill Murray, like
the actor.
Ghostbuster. Bill
Yeah.
Okay.
So he tells this story about how one day he was walking down, at the beginning of his career, when things weren't really working for him, he was walking aimlessly down the streets of this city, and he was thinking about walking towards the water to end it. And then he stopped by like an art studio or like an art exhibit, and he went inside and he saw a painting of a woman in a field working with the sun rising, and he just felt like, he said something really beautiful about it, just how like, the sun will rise, no matter how bad your day is, the next day the sun will rise again. And he talked about how it helped save his life, and I think that art can do that. And so like there's, John K. Sampson is someone who, from the Weaker Thens, and he has a solo work which I've listened to a lot, and Bon Iver and the National and Pearl Jam, and Taylor Swift, and with folklore, and like all these albums I listened to over, and I have a playlist I made for Theory of Crows, which I listened to while I was writing the book, and so what I found was that, like, as I was writing the novel, I really wanted to honor the people that helped save me by incorporating their work into the novel. And so the first draft of the book, I had I think 5 or 6 songs, the lyrics from 5 or 6 songs quoted in the novel. And I sent it to my editor at HarperCollins, Jen Lambert, and she wrote back and she's like, you can't quote all these lyrics, you have to pay for them. And so I thought, I didn't think about that. So then I had to choose like one person I was gonna pay to use their lyrics, and that was Sufjan Stevens. And so that was really gracious of him to let me use his lyrics from his song Ascension. But then I had to take out all the other. John let me, John I know a little bit, so John let me use his lyrics from one of his songs. But the other ones I took out, and I put them back in. I put like poetry, I think, from what I wrote when I was in high school.
Oh, is that Holly's poetry?
Yeah. So all the poetry in the book that Holly writes is poetry I wrote when I was in high school, which I felt was more authentic as well if it was a teenage voice. So I used that instead of song lyrics, and then so that's kind of how I got around not being able to use actual lyrics, but I still referenced the bands in the book because I wanted them to the characters to talk about them, because like Holly and Matthew, the connections that they have, I feel, are like anxiety and music, and both I think are very strong connections, whether it's in a negative way initially or in a really positive way.
And it lets them be equals as well. I felt like she gives as good as she gets in terms of the knowledge and the quizzes and the tests and things. Yeah,
I think there's a scene when they're driving to Norway House where they're quizzing each other on they're giving each other music trivia. Yeah, which was kind of, that was fun to do that.
It felt very real. I have to say, I was like, I feel this has come from somewhere before.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for this, David. I'm going to open it up now to the floor if anybody has any other questions at this point. And if not, I might ask you to read another little bit to close. Would that be okay?
Yeah, sure.
I know we said one, but I feel like there's lots to choose from there.
I can do that. Yeah.
In that case, yes, to close us out, please give us another reading.
Okay, I will find this passage. I'm going to read a passage that it's kind of like the title. It explains the title of the book. And it's another letter that Matthew writes. So I'm just going to find it quickly. If I can't find it, I'll just open a page and I'll just point randomly to here it is. Okay, here we go. Anyway. Oh, this is not it.
To be fair, by the way, I did say...
I got it.
Brilliant, because I did only say one reading. I didn't prepare you for that, but it's too good.
Well, when you work on a book, you write it... I mean, I've read it probably 100 times, but then when you're done, you never read it again. So just I'm done, with this... Not that I'm done, I do readings from it, but anyway.
Just have to talk about it for a year.
Yeah, okay. Well, this is a letter that Matthew writes to Holly. And it's just him talking about the grandfather. The grandfather, I don't think it's a spoiler to say the grandfather passes away in the novel, the father and the grandfather. So this is just him talking to Holly about his understanding of the trap line and the feeling of home there. Musham used to talk about the trap line like an old friend he hadn't seen for years. He'd made plans to visit. He'd intended to visit as people make plans to see one another, but never did. They weren't empty promises. He just ran out of time. When we got deep in a conversation, our words always led back to the land. For Musham, the land was the answer to everything. The trees whisper answers to any question you could think to ask by the rustling of their leaves. Musham said the land remembered every foot that pressed down on its surface, every set of eyes that gazed upon its ancient beauty, every fingertip that touched its skin, every face the sun warmed. Every living thing was an extension of the land, and when you walked onto it, you became an extension of it too. You became the land. He said you could remember the land even if you'd never been there before, if your ancestors lived on it, and in turn, the land remembered you. Musham used to talk about the crows. They would erupt from the trees like shards of night and circle above in a dance, swirling lines of black. When they cawed, it would be a song. They would dance to that welcoming song. As you walked deeper and deeper into the trap line, the crows would lower, their music would grow louder, and soon you'd be engulfed by them. It would feel like night no matter what time of day it was, but you wouldn't be afraid. I used to try to picture crows bursting from trees, flying in circles, singing a welcoming song, and dancing lower and lower until they held me in their dark embrace, and thought, it was really hard to believe. Would crows even do that? Would they dance in the air? Would they sing? What was this trap line? Some kind of really messed up Disney movie? Could a bird remember somebody even after years of absence? How long did a crow live anyway? 10 years, 20? If somebody could remember the land even if they'd never been there before, could it work the same way with crows? Could the crows remember them and their children and their children's children? Could crows pass down that recognition as well? Musham never lied to me, but there were Cree legends he told me that I knew weren't true, that represented something else, like, I know that Canada isn't actually on the back of a turtle. I know that Wissahickijak didn't create humans. He didn't make mud out of dirt and water and mold that mud into a humanoid figure and dry it over fire and breathe life into it. The theory of crows seemed equally tenuous but provable if you were to go to the place where you would be remembered. The irony of all this was that Musham couldn't remember where his trapline was. For all his talk of how the land and the swift water, the birds and the four-legged creatures could answer any question, remember any person, accept you as a part of it, it was lost to him. Water levels rose and changed once familiar shorelines. Landmarks fell away like broken street signs. Cabins were destroyed, cabins were constructed. Maybe if he could have gone himself, if he could have traversed the same waterways that he did as a child, he could have found his way there one last time. Maybe he could have seen enough of the path to rediscover the place he remembered, and it would have remembered him, a waterfall, a bend in the river, an eagle's nest bulging at the top of a thin tree like a bursting water pipe, a lake with so many reeds protruding through the surface that it looked like hair, a narrow stream of water no wider than a sidewalk. Maybe. Musham used to talk about the importance of time. The animals had patterns that you needed to follow. And if you missed those patterns, you ate less and you were able to trade less. You would be left behind as though swallowed by the darkness and lost within it. I've never been to the land. He ran out of time, and because of that, so did I. But I know what it's like. I know what it feels like to know what home is and not be able to find your way there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
People are invited to go to the Espace Salon at the Moran Centre just beside to purchase a title. This title, The Theory of Crows by David A. Robertson, and to meet the authors later at a signing session. I think you'll be later today? At some point today. David might be there for a signing session, or just grab him, I think. Thank you so much for a brilliant conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, David A. Robertson, please.